the first way you want to think of an introduction is dynamic, right? It's a dynamic thing. It's not the base of it, or the stem might look the same 70 to 80% of the time, but you want to add enough for the nuance. This is talking to all the coaches out here, because I've been in this world too. So for example, I've worked with a ton of companies, right? But if I'm speaking to someone in medicine, I'll say, my name is Blake Eastman. I own a company called the Nonverbal Group. We're a behavioral research organization, whatever my spiel is. I will connect it to medicine. And I'll say, for example, so one of the things I like is I do the whole basically thing. And what basically means is I say what I do, and I say basically, and then I bring the environment to explain what I actually do. And I make it more visceral, and I pull the person in. So it's basically we do high level research on human behavior. For example, I have a camera here, and here that's recording everything, and I can see how boom, 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 to make it more interactive. And too often people don't realize that, the introduction is what you want to do. So sometimes I don't want to talk about work. I'll start talking about nonverbal group and body language, and people will be like, oh my God, that's so, I don't want to do it. So I might shift my introduction a little bit and talk about, and for you, I think the best example is introduce what you do, followed by storytelling. So there's more points of connection in storytelling than anything else. The problem is, for all you coaches listening, don't go into storytelling mode. So don't be like, oh, when I was 5 years old, an event happened that changed my life. Yeah. It's more of an anecdotal social storytelling. So I think and we actually have data on this, where it's if people go from introduction to brief story, it is so much easier for the next person to connect. So what I like to do is sort of bring in my life. So I'd be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I was just on this podcast. We had a really interesting discussion about introduction. So now I'm in my head a little bit about this introduction, just integrating a little bit more of yourself and not doing that standard, I help blank do blank for blank smile. What about you? Yeah. Just add a little bit more character, a little bit more depth. And you want to play with it a little bit. So you said to nail the intro. That language I would tell you to not focus on. You can't nail anything. It's going to be depending on the construct. And it's really, think of your introduction as the beginning of a creation. What kind of conversation you want to create? What kind of dynamic do you want to actually have? And another thing on intros, make sure you understand the context of an intro. I go to some events and everybody's in a big circle. It's all right, we're going to do a quick round of intros. And somebody goes for 20 seconds and somebody goes for 20 seconds. And then this person goes for 6 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta match the norm of what's going on, right? So this is why I love the question. It's so dynamic, right? It's not just say who you are, what you do, and 3 things for fun, right? That could work in some places. For me, and talk about lenses, I can't, one of my pet peeves, I think, is when people have those icebreaker questions. So I meet them and they're like, so Blake, so tell me, what are you most passionate about right now? And I'm just well, I get I don't want to do this whole, because I know what they're doing. And they will systematically walk to everybody in the room and ask that question. And I think those are good things to get comfortable, but the more dynamic you are, the more you're able to sort of see people and meet them where they're at, the higher level communicator you're going to be. So don't think that there's these rigid rules that you could apply everywhere that will always work. It's just, that's not human behavior.
Yeah. So when somebody asks that kind of question, I'm not that person. I get annoyed by those questions too. But is it because they're not listening after they ask, what are you more passionate about? Is that what breaks the bond?
I have passions for them. I think they just, the people that do this, they may struggle in social interactions. They might want to find something easy, and that works, which is fine. Just cycle the questions a little bit. Think about the questions. Think about how it could potentially land. Sometimes it really works. Sometimes you could show up on a date or an event and ask a couple of questions that are really sort of interesting. But when they're more contextually nuanced, they're going to be better questions, right? When so for example, if you said what you do, I might immediately go, oh my God, I've been coaching for 18 years. We got to share some notes here. So I would probably ask you some more nuanced questions all right, tell me best client story, worst client story, or something, so that we can start to connect on what it is like to run a coaching business and to coach people and to be in this whole world that has its own nuance. So me and you have a ton of stories about coaching that we could probably talk for 6 hours about. I might want to go in that direction, but maybe I don't want to talk about coaching today. So maybe we talk about Austin. Maybe we talk about this. Just think of it as dynamic. Think of just that frame of not trying to be the same person in every single room. And also, as an entrepreneur and as a coach, like, you got to speak. If you're a coach, speak to who's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not like, if you're a physical fitness coach and you're in a room with a bunch of 6-figure entrepreneurs, it's way more effective to say, oh, I'm a fitness coach, but I specifically work with 6-figure entrepreneurs that are busy and da-da-da-da-da. Because then it's like, oh, you're for me.
Yeah.
And there's a way of pitching yourself that it's like, I am for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. That's how I started my journey unconsciously, where I was like, I would, usually you'll go to events, it'll have that introduction table. And what I would do is I would try to sit in a place where I'm next to the person that is kind of hosting the table, because usually you come last.
Yeah.
If you're especially on the left side,
smart.
it's usually you're like
Other side. They'll turn to the right and go, what about you?
It's always the right person.
I love that.
And they go around, or the person across. But basically, you'll not be the first one, because you're sitting next to the person that is the most vocal, or the host. And so what I found is, because I would wait for at least 3-4 people before I have to make an introduction, I would just adapt my introduction to what they just said, because now I know what's the group that is on the table. And I ended up usually, and again, it will sound really canned at this point, but it was because mostly I would end up in situations like that, where I would be like, all right, I help entrepreneurs that are doing 1 to 3 million, because usually they're overworking. They're working really hard. They're working all the time. They have no team. They're suffering because profits, they tank between 1 and 3 million usually. And so I help them really find life again and be able to build a business that is actually also fulfilling them, or some variation of that. Again, contextual. But now that you say it, I was like, oh, that's kind of like what I was doing as well, is just waiting for my turn a little bit so I can make a contextual introduction.
Exactly. And then everybody in that room, whether they're a $1 to $3 million entrepreneur or not, knows somebody, and it fine tunes the connection path. It's like a vocal funnel, right? Like, it's like being able to get people into your sort of world.